Kat, thanks for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
That's my pleasure. I think we should probably start with a bit of a shout out, actually, to the guy that kind of facilitated this behind the scenes, our Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach, Aaron, who is a big fan of yours, actually. I'm sure he's told you directly. And to give some context to the listeners and viewers, Aaron is Aaron's a big 6'4" purple belt, super knowledgeable, but from years and years of motor racing and now jumping out of planes and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, has all kinds of back issues, and he constantly talks to me about two people that are making a significant impact on his recovery, and one is Adam Duncan, my sport therapist, his sports therapist, who was the first guest on the podcast and is coming back on soon. And the second one is you. He always is talking about how he's doing your YouTube yoga routines. So as soon as he said, like, you guys should get together, I thought, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's good. It's good that he has been. It's funny, actually, because Aubrey, my daughter, was looking at his iPad in jiu-jitsu class on YouTube, and I just subscribed to my own channel.
Oh, I love that.
Yoga. And I said, Aaron, I've just subscribed to my yoga channel for you. Go and check it out. And he did.
And it snowballed from
he
there.
Loved it.
Well, there we go. It's he's such a supportive guy, but he has been, talking about it. It's not just a passing comment with him. He's been really talking about how much it's been of value. So that's tremendous. So what's cool about this podcast, Kat, is that you and I know each other a little bit, but not a lot. We've only sort of recently started training together. So I'm quite looking forward to getting to know you a little bit through this as well. But for those that don't know you at all, or maybe know you a little bit but don't know your background, could you give us a bit of an intro as to who you are, and then we'll get onto the yoga stuff, because we know you're a big yogi.
Well, I am a creative, so I actually did all my formal education in art. I studied illustration and photography at the University of Arts London and trained to be an art teacher. So I'm really into that side of life. And I think that links as well with yoga, because they're both meditative. And I've also really been into fitness and yoga since an early age as well. And so I decided to do a yoga teacher training, and that just, I think yoga is a calling. I think it's, it's just something that the universe wanted me to do, and that I'm always drawn back to yoga. I've actually just started a photography business as well, but yoga is still my true love. I've
seen your photography. It's phenomenal. People should also check that out. And again, I don't know you super well, but I can certainly tell that I think a creative is a good is a good kind of adjective for summing you up as a person. It's really interesting. You talk about yoga being a calling. My mother-in-law in recent years has kind of really found herself spiritually. And I think that actually started with yoga. She wanted just to maybe be a little bit more active and a little bit fitter. So she started going to a local yoga class, fell in love with it. And what was really interesting is how that has now sort of snowballed into, she's really big into looking at energy and aura. And so I really do see that link firsthand. Whereas people maybe see it as just a form of exercise.
Yeah.
Kind of true yoga enthusiasts do see it as something more. So when did you fall in love with yoga?
I think I fell in love with it when my mum gave me a yoga book when I was about 13, and she said, "You're tall, so you need to look after your back." So I'm tall, I'm nearly 5'10", and I was always tall from a young age, and my mum knew that yoga is a way to help you stay healthy and strong and keep good posture. So when I was about 13, a tall teenager, she gave me this book, and I just did the poses in my bedroom, and I loved them and just felt really blissful. And I knew I loved it. And then when I was at uni, in my third year, as I said, I was in London. Course was stressful, life was stressful in London, and I did yoga at a local gym. And it was just the highlight of my life, really, a couple of times a week, going to those classes.
That's really interesting. And we all know that the exercise in general is a great way to de-stress. There's been a ton of evidence recently on how exercise is, I think the study was, or the main study that leads the way in this, was that exercise is 1.5 more times more effective than at curing acute depression than I think medicine and therapy combined. And whilst I'm a big advocate of, if you need the medicine, take the medicine, you should definitely be doing therapy, but certainly working out in general. But from what I understand, and as I said to you before we hit record, that I'm not an expert when it comes to yoga. I'm not particularly well schooled in it, but certainly when I have done it as prehab and rehab in my football days, there is something about it, and maybe it's the breathing, I don't know, maybe it's just the very chilled out nature of it, that it does feel like more than exercise. It feels there is something quite relaxing, although it's quite hard. It's, people think it's just sitting around going on. It's but there is something about that balance of it being difficult yet being very, very relaxing. And again, maybe it comes back to that spiritual thing, I don't know.
Well, you're meditating when you do yoga, so the word yoga actually means to link. So you're linking together breath and movement, and your mind and your body, and your mind and your breath. And when your mind is focusing on that point that is maybe the breath, maybe you're just observing how it feels to be breathing in, how it feels to be breathing out, the sensations of stretches that you're feeling in your muscles, you're actually in a state of meditation. And as you probably know, research shows that when you meditate, you have better mental clarity, you're happier, stress relief. So you don't have to be just sitting like that completely still, letting nothing be in your brain to be meditating. If you're actually focusing on a point, so it could be anything, could be the breath. So you are meditating basically when you're doing yoga, and that's why you feel happy.
No doubt. And I think the breathwork thing is, I think it's getting a lot of press again currently, not just with yoga, but just in general. People talking about breathwork. We teach kids, of which you have 2, if I'm not mistaken. I've got a now 1-year-old. He was 6 months, which is crazy when I started the podcast. The time flies. We tell them to take a deep breath when they are stressed or anxious, and something that was really interesting, and I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on this, is so I do cold exposure every morning. That's in a way kind of my yoga. That's my reset. It sets me up for the day really well. I also like that I'm doing something hard immediately, first thing. That really kind of, that's how I'm wired. But what I notice is, so I did this actually as a way of trying to A, keep warm, and B, just kind of not think about the fact that I'm really fucking cold. But when I'm in the cold plunge, I know that 5 minutes is about 30 breaths. So I go like long in, long out. And like I said, at first it was just a case of just focus on something that's not the fact that I'm freezing. And it's really amazing how my cold exposure then became my meditation. And I get out with the adrenaline rush, the dopamine rush of getting cold, but also that mental clarity of having spent 5 minutes just doing breath work. And so I think I actually now look forward more to the breath work than I do. Well, I don't look forward to getting cold, but that breath work every morning is so valuable for me. It becomes so important. So let's start with breath work if we can. Why do we think that's so valuable? Why is that so helpful?
I think there's different breaths, different pranayama techniques that you can do depending on what you're looking for. So there's belly breathing, so where you breathe, it's actually diaphragmatic breathing, so you're breathing from the respiratory diaphragm, so from here. And when you inhale, you're filling the lower portions of the lungs, and they're more rich in blood supply. That's a very relaxing breath. You can also do the full yogic breath, where you breathe into the belly and then all the way up into the chest, and those ones will help to calm and relax you, as well as oxygenate you better. So they're rejuvenating for all the cells in your body. There's other ones. So there's one called Kapalabhati, which is where you do like a pumping breath from the diaphragm, and that's very energizing, and it moves a lot of energy in your body. There's Sitali, where you need to cool yourself down, so you have to make a little tube with your tongue and suck the air through. So depending on what you're looking for, you can find a breath. Another great one is Ujjayi breath, and it means victorious breath, or it kind of gives you inner strength. So you breathe, you kind of slightly constrict the throat. And I teach pregnancy yoga as well, and I teach a lot of breathing for labor, and that's another good one that I teach in that.
That
so it gives you that sense of strength.
That cannot be understated. As most men, when your other half is in labor, you feel really useless. And there's a lot of quite funny memes on the internet, and I send these to my wife regularly, that no one gives the husband a pat on the back for sitting in that awful hospital chair or sleeping on that that hospital couch for several hours. No one gives us a pat, but I get it. But the one thing that I felt I could help, and my wife tells me, I'm sure she's probably just humoring me, but she tells me it was a huge help. The only thing that I was able to help with is that we counted the breaths. We knew that the contractions would come in waves, and just like a contraction, when you contract your muscles in the gym, you breathe through it. And we knew that, right, we only got to do, again, similar to the cold plunge, we just need to do X amount of breaths to get through this, and then it's gone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's actually a wonderful picture of, so my wife had a water birth, and she's kneeling on the side of the tub, and we're head to head, and we're counting breaths, and it's by far my favorite picture ever. But what was really interesting is how she'd done the research prior, and we did it together, but just breathing through it, no panicking, no hyperventilating, just steady breath. So I think that's amazing. I work with a lot of busy professionals, and this podcast was initially set up for the busy professional. And we talk about the benefits of stress relief, and breathing, for people that are in high pressure roles and under a lot of stress. I guess it's fair to say that the breathing techniques of yoga don't have to be reserved for the yoga mat or the yoga studio, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes down to that same thing. When you're observing your breath, you're meditating. If you can slow your breath down, if you can lengthen the exhalation, that will help your body enter parasympathetic nervous state. So I don't know if you know about that. So when you're in that state, that's when you're not releasing the adrenaline, you start releasing the feel-good hormones, your heart rate slows, and your heart rate is actually very slightly slower as you exhale than when you inhale. So if you can be exhaling for a longer portion of the circle of breath, so a longer portion of time you're exhaling, generally your heart rate will slow down. So to lengthen that exhalation is calming physiologically for your body, and obviously the mind and the body are linked, so it also will be for your mind. And so yeah, you can do that anywhere. No one even has to know that you're doing it. And that full yogic breath I was telling you about as well, which is where you breathe all the way up to the very top of the chest and then all the way down to the belly. You can do it just subtly, and that's a good anxiety reliever as well.
So could you talk us through that then in a bit more detail? So let's say you're sat at your desk, or wherever, but and it's really coming on top, and you can feel that you've gone from kind of that initial, like, again, if you're like me, I need a base level of stress to operate at a high level, but you can feel yourself getting past that point. What technique would you be looking to implement, or would you advise implementing, and how would that look in terms of maybe seconds in, seconds out?
Well, yeah, if you wanted to do a full yogic breath, you don't have to use your hands, but if you wanted to, you could use your hands as a guide. So you could be sitting at your desk doing this, you could be standing up in a queue.
Like a true yogi, though, you're sat on the floor doing this podcast.
Of course, it's most comfortable for me. But yeah, you don't have to use your hands, but you could just place your hands on your belly, and then you just think about the warmth of your hands and the sensation of them on your belly, and you breathe all the way down to the belly. So a lot of people reverse breathe. So it's where they breathe high into the chest on the inhale and their belly kind of goes in. That's not great for you. So you want to inhale into the belly, and that's actually your diaphragm contracting and drawing breath into the lower portions of the lungs. So obviously your abdominal organs kind of come out a bit. So relaxed belly, down to the belly, And then as you breathe out, you send all the breath out, and you might even suck the tummy in a little bit as you breathe out to send all that breath out, making space for new breath. And so the breath comes into the belly, and then you breathe into the rib cage. Wide and full, out from the ribs, out from the belly, all the way out. So every single last drop of breath, and then you've got space for new breath into the belly, into the chest, all the way to the collarbones, and all the way down, all the way out.
That's brilliant.
And you'll immediately feel better. It's very oxygenating, so that breath can exchange up to 3 liters of air in an adult, whereas in a normal breath you only exchange about half a liter every time. So you can imagine how much more oxygen you're bringing in, and so you might feel a little bit like woo.
Right, a little bit oxygen drunk.
Use your hands, so you can just do that.
That's really cool. So it's a case of, and this is going to sound really uneducated, but shock, it's coming from me. So we're just filling ourselves up with air. It's not a case of, because you hear about things like the breathing square, and these different, X amount of seconds in, hold, X amount of seconds.
Yeah.
You're just saying fill yourself up slowly in a controlled way, and then let it go. So would it be fair to assume then that that is something you will get better at over time? So perhaps to put a bit of context in, I'm asthmatic. I found out in recent years I'm a mouth breather. I also found out that's an insult for people to call people a mouth breather. I didn't know that until recently. I was quite offended, and I started sleeping with the mouth strips on as a result. But I always found it really hard because I didn't, despite being super fit, I didn't know how to breathe properly. And it wasn't until I read, I think the book is called Breathe by James Nestor, that there is a proper way to breathe and an improper way to breathe, as you were talking about. So at first, when I was trying to teach myself how to control my breath, I found it really difficult, to get enough air in, because I was breathing high into my chest, not down into my stomach. But also I was finding that again, despite having pretty good cardio, I was struggling to get what felt like enough breath in and then enough breath out. So I guess it's just something that, it's a muscle that will grow over time, right? If you keep doing it, you'll be able to get more and more air in. Or am I kind of missing the point?
Well, practice makes better, if you've heard of that. So every practice you will become, I mean, I don't like using the word better or worse for yoga, because some people say, oh, I'm not good at yoga, but that's really not the point. You just have to be doing it to be good at it. But I mean, what you're talking about, I expect you probably had very tight chest muscles, and you probably didn't have the mind-body awareness to actually separate the action of the diaphragm, the respiratory diaphragm. So that respiratory diaphragm is like a flat muscle at the base of the rib cage, separating the organs of the chest from the organs of the abdomen, and it actually contracts. So it's kind of like, I'll tilt my thing down a bit, it's kind of like dome shaped when it's relaxed. So that's your exhale, and then your inhale, it contracts and goes flat, and the breath comes into the lower portions of the lungs. So if you're not able to consciously work that muscle, then you're going to find it hard to diaphragmatically breathe. But the more you practice, the more you'll get those neural networks, and you'll be able to do it. And then if you can increase the flexibility of your chest muscles through the deep breathing, because every time you breathe, you're expanding the chest, or through yoga asana, so the stretches, then you're going to be able to physically take in a deeper breath. So yeah, practice makes better.
I love that. Out of interest, why not practice makes perfect? I've never heard practice makes better before.
Because everything is nothing is perfect, and everything is perfect in its imperfection.
Very good. I thought you'd have some sort of creative answer for that. Very cool. Cool. So that's the breathwork side. We know that yoga is really multi-layered, and this is why I'm so interested to talk to you about this, because there are the people that love it for its spiritual links, and they use it as some escapism. Athletes like myself, when I was playing football, we would use it as, like I say, prehab and rehab. Particularly for me, I was a goalkeeper, so the ability to kind of move my body in certain ways. Was quite important to be flexible and agile. So what are some of the physical benefits of yoga?
Okay, well, obviously flexibility of the muscles, but yoga will also build tone and strengthen the muscles too. And you also get better internal organ function, because a lot of the poses you might be bringing your knees in and breathing down into the belly and massaging all the internal organs as your belly expands, and that increases blood supply to the internal organs. So it's balancing for your hormones as well. And yeah, I mean, when you, and I know you wanted to talk about people who kind of have a sedentary lifestyle as well. So when your muscles are sitting, if you're sitting still and your muscles are kind of always in a state of contraction, like say, for example, you were sitting at a desk, your hip flexors are in contraction and your hamstrings are stretched, the blood supply isn't flowing well to those muscles, and your body will actually tighten up the muscles that are being stretched to create stability in the body, because they're being overstretched. And then obviously the muscles that are in contraction, they're not getting good blood supply, because that's what tension is. So when the muscles are constantly contracted, that's tension. So yoga, because you're moving in and out of those stretches, those like isometric strengthening poses, so where you're like a plank, for example, you're holding your body against gravity, you're not flopping down onto the earth, you're holding it up. So that isometric contraction, eccentric contraction, so if you lower yourself down slowly against gravity, that's really toning for your muscles. It's great for them. And obviously you do have some weight bearing, like for example, even just being on hands and knees is weight bearing for the arms. It's actually classed as weight bearing exercise, so it's good for preventing osteoporosis if you're just on hands and knees or a plank, because you're putting the weight through those bones and the muscles. So all of this is healthy for your muscles. You're going to be bringing blood supply through that engagement and release of the muscles, and oxygenating, letting the cells release their toxins, keeping your muscles bouncy, because that's what we want. We don't want any muscles to be really tense. We don't want them to be weak and overstretched. We want them to be strong, flexible, and well circulated. Lots of blood supply.
Right.
Yoga will do that.
So we're not. It's not a million miles away from being. I mean, we could almost put it in a category of calisthenic training.
Yeah.
It's body weight. You talked about the plank position, lowering yourself slow. That's a press up, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So
I mean, that usually keep the elbows in. It's called chaturanga. So you keep the elbows in and lower yourself down slowly.
Right.
People say it's a yoga push up.
Right. But it's still that coming through the eccentric part of a traditional movement.
Yeah.
So, I think to the uneducated, yoga sometimes is seen as being, what's the right term I'm looking for here? Not easy, because no one thinks it's easy, particularly when you see like the high level stuff that people like yourself do. But yeah, and I suppose they do, but it's really not. It's holding these positions is super hard.
You'll never know the amount of people that come for the first time into a yoga class. And I used to teach yoga for BJJ over at another gym, and so there was these BJJ MMA people, and they would, I'm not going to yoga, oh, that's for girls, oh, that's easy. And then they'd have like an extra class they needed to use up, and they'd come and they go, oh, that was so difficult, I can't believe it.
I believe it. I believe that totally. And you touched on something that's really interesting there, is that yoga's for girls.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, I think, that is slowly changing.
What a strange thing, because originally it wasn't for girls.
Is that right?
Yeah, the original yogis were all men over in India.
Of course, that's a really good point. Yeah. Why? I mean, do you think it because it's traditionally, or perhaps more in a more modern way, it's not a masculine thing? You talked about MMA fighters. We live in the kind of, we're more than ever in the gym bro era. You can't go on Instagram without seeing, these huge Greek god looking dudes lifting weights. And why would I do yoga when I could just train my biceps more, or I could get a bigger chest, or what is that stigma, and where do you think that's come from?
I don't know is the answer. I really don't know. Maybe it's something I should research a bit more. I mean, obviously, if you're going to train your chest and get your really big biceps, you're going to have super tight muscles. You're not going to be able to breathe, just like you have described. I mean, you see those men and their postures are like this because their pecs are so tight that it's pulling their shoulders forward. They shrink in height.
Yeah, I'm smiling because that was me.
Yeah.
I got my first weights bench when I was 16, and all I did was bench press and bicep curls, because that's really all you needed at 16 to kind of have a little bit of a bicep. I mean, I've still only got a little bit of a bicep now, but very quickly what I noticed that my posture became awful, really hunched. And actually I'm 36 now, so that's 20 years of having to correct that mistake. Just when I was just a kid, and I thought I was doing something good, but that lack of education, I still hunch if I'm not careful. I have to do an awful lot of posture correcting
we all
work.
do. I do too. I have to continually check my posture. I'm a forward pelvic tilter.
Right.
And I think that also comes from when you've been pregnant, because the weight of the baby pulls your pelvis forward and deepens your curve of your lower back and kind of makes your body want to do that. That's why yoga is so great in pregnancy. Like, I just want to shout that out, because it's just so good for pregnancy. It's perfect exercise because it's slow and gentle, but still powerful and keeps your posture good. But yeah, I mean, I have to constantly remind myself, neutral pelvis when I'm standing around. I have to constantly say it to myself.
And I think just the day we're in at the moment is, we're all mobile phones and we're all desk, and I hope I don't butcher this statistic, but Adam Duncan, my sports therapist, who again was on the podcast and is coming back on very soon, he told me a statistic when he was on the pod which blew me away, and I hope I get this right, and I will fact check it. For every inch that you bring your head forward, it increases in weight by 10 pounds.
Well, yeah, because it's like a lever.
That's 4 kilos, close to 4 kilos, something like that.
I don't really know my units.
That's a lot of weight. And so actually, whilst you touched on something that I want to stay on for a minute, because by no kind of deliberate act, but you are my first female guest. The first series was all guys, and I'm not trying to balance it out just to be woke, but I think it's really important to give a spread. And again, having a 1-year-old and only recently been through this process with my wife, let's talk about yoga for pregnancy, because the one thing I've noticed now, I was really ignorant to it before, but I've really noticed now, is that being healthy during your pregnancy means, generally, touch wood, and there will be some exceptions, but an easier birth and an easier postpartum recovery.
I mean, yes, absolutely. But I just also want to stress that the baby will come how it wants to come. I think this is something that I'm kind of struggling with. I think there's a really huge pressure on women to have this perfect birth and perfect labor and a water birth like your wife had. But it really doesn't always happen that way, because birth is dangerous. And, we're so lucky that we have the medical care that we do, because, this saves a lot of babies. I definitely, yes, definitely. There's a lot that you can learn that will help you, like the positions. I mean, obviously I've been a yoga teacher for a really long time, and I taught pregnancy yoga for a really long time, 10 years even before I had Bo, my son, who's 7. I thought I would ace through the birth because I was a yoga teacher and I'd done all the yoga and I knew all the breathing and I knew the hypnobirthing techniques. And I did. I laboured in the water. I used the breathing techniques. I was like so chilled. I've got a picture of me in the tub like this, in labour, just looking. I was like in a blissful state, but he was 10 pound one and he got stuck coming out. And he actually had one of the most dangerous, probably the most dangerous birth complication that there is, which is a shoulder dystocia, which is where the head is born and then the shoulder gets stuck. And so the baby can't breathe because its cord is compressed, its chest is compressed, and it's a life-threatening complication. So you just never know what's going to happen. I try not to mention it too much to my pregnancy yoga students.
Right, yeah.
But then when it came to Aubrey, of course, I readily accepted medical intervention. I had her induced early, so she wasn't too big. Like I didn't want to get induced with Bo because I was like, I have to have a perfect natural birth.
Yes,
but he grew to 10 pound one.
Right,
it was hard to get out.
Mm-hmm.
So I got Aubrey induced. I did more research, having had the shoulder dystocia, on positions that open the pelvic outlet more, so the bottom of the pelvis, and I used that. So that, the yoga helped. I did more research as well on techniques of pushing. I found a really good program, which was actually a Pilates program. So yoga and Pilates are very linked. The founder Joseph Pilates of Pilates and Iyengar, who brought yoga to the West, they knew each other. So it's all really linked. But yeah, so I used all that and I had a very easy birth with Aubrey, but I was induced, so it's very medicalized, but she came flying out and it was great.
Right.
So, definitely yes, but don't get hung up on it, is what I would say to pregnant mums. Don't think it's necessarily,
yeah, I think it's a really valid point, but it would, and again, maybe this is just because I'm a lifelong athlete and I'm looking at things in the way that you should at least try and stack the deck in your favor.
Yes, absolutely, you should try and stack the deck in your favor, but yeah, try not to be too sad, if it doesn't necessarily pan out in that way. But there's definitely, things you can do through yoga and positions you can use that will help potentially.
Sure. Could you? I know it's a deep and layered topic, but and if you're getting all of your information from a podcast, you're probably not doing enough research. But would there be some things that you'd be saying, like, hey, pregnant mums, these are some things you might want to consider if you are, well, not just early in your pregnancy, but as you progress through? Is there some kind of key highlight bullet points that they should be going and researching?
Yeah, I think positions for labor. So first stage labor, when you're having your contractions, you need to open the pelvic inlet, so wide leg poses, and then as you push the baby out, you need to open the pelvic outlet, so it's actually knees rolling in. So research that, plan some positions so that you're ready, so you can be like, right, I'm doing this position now, I'm doing that position now. And then circles, so circling the pelvis all through your pregnancy, because it helps to get the baby into optimal fetal position, because the head is heavy, so as you move around, the head is kind of drawn downwards and the spine is drawn to the front of the belly. Sit on a birthing ball, so you're sitting like forward, not slunching back, because that helps. That if you kind of lean back on the couch or your pregnancy, the baby's spine can go towards the back of your spine, because again, the spine is heavy. So sitting up tall, slightly leaning forward, circles, and those are good for labor as well. So as you circle, as the baby's head presses on the cervix, it will only happen when you're in labor. You can do it all through pregnancy. It's not going to make you go into labor, but when you're in labor, the baby's head pressing on the cervix as you circle around helps to dilate the cervix. So yeah, circles, and then look at labor and birth positions would be my 2 tips.
Good advice.
Yeah.
And I think, and again, I'm really careful when I talk about pregnancy and birth, because what do I know? All I know is what I've been told and what my wife and I researched. but it is, of course, physically exhausting. So again, looking at it from what I think is a logical standpoint, and maybe this is coming from a place of ignorance, but you want to be relatively conditioned in those positions, I would assume.
Yes, that's actually a very, very, very good point. So I taught pregnancy yoga the other day, and we were just doing the hands and knees, and one of the ladies said, "Oh, my arms are so weak, I can't even be on hands and knees." And I said, well, yeah, this is why you need to practice this, so that, because if you want to be on hands and knees in labor, which is a very good labor position, you need to strengthen up. So you need to practice all through your pregnancy, get those arms nice and strong, get your wrists strong and flexible, because if you're going to be on hands and knees, you need that too. Although obviously there are other things you can use, like a birthing ball or the bed to rest on. But yeah, absolutely. Leg strength. You might want to be standing up when you're in labor, because the quality helps.
I think that's really important, because if it's hard to do in a chilled out yoga room now, you wait till the adrenaline is spiking and dumping and spiking and dumping, and then the panic sets in.
Well, I mean, hopefully that isn't happening to you in labour.
Right. Maybe I should just stop talking about pregnancy. I'm probably not doing a very good job here, but no, I think that's really interesting, Kat. So thanks for sharing that. I think that'll bring a lot of value, and I think straight away we need to make sure we clip that and just put that out, because I think those points are amazing. Cool. So we talked briefly about work being stressful and the breathing techniques we could use. You also talked very eloquently about sitting for too long and what tension looks like. And again, he's getting a lot of press in this podcast, but Adam Duncan talked to me about, because I asked him about seating positions. We talked about desk setup at work, how kind of occupational health is kind of a wishy-washy thing in a lot of corporations. They mean well, but perhaps they don't have the education. And he always talked to me about the best position is the next position. So the key is not staying in the same position for too long. What would you be, and by the way, I've got to give you a bit of a plug here. Your yoga, your YouTube channel is amazing. You sent me a brilliant video, I think it was yesterday or the day before, on office-based yoga, which I thought was
yoga cool.
Desk yoga. Yeah, it was brilliant. And the one thing that really kind of stood out for me when I was watching that video is it's quite subtle. It's really important. And I've talked ad nauseum about get away from your desk. Training yourself to your desk is not productive. Yes, you will work more hours, but the quality of your work will fall off a cliff very quickly. Bad for your cortisol levels, terrible for your eyesight. Get out and walk on your lunch, move around, work in pockets of deep work. But when you sort of say to someone, yeah, you could do yoga at work, I think they think about like rolling out a mat and taking shoes. And what I thought was really interesting was kind of how, like I say, subtle it was. It's obvious that you're doing some sort of mobility or something like that, but I thought it was really cool how, it's easy to make excuses as to why not to do it, but I think you've kind of left that you've left that kind of overturned, because it is so straightforward. So everybody should go and check that out. But if we could talk about it here for a little bit, desk yoga, could you kind of talk me through it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, with that video, what I was aiming for was a little routine that people, I mean, I kind of imagined they would actually sit at their desk in the office and do the routine. And I think I say it at the end, if you do this in the office, make sure you tell your colleagues that you're practicing Sara yoga.
Yeah, I love that.
So when you're kind of going like this and they're like, what are you doing? I'm practicing Sara yoga. So it's just, it's very small movements. So you can sit at your desk, you can take a 5-minute break. So it's just kind of neck mobility. So we move our necks side to side, flexion, a very gentle extension. So you're just stretching all these muscles, moving the neck through its ranges of motion. Actually, I haven't watched that video for a while, but I think what do I do? Some side stretches perhaps. and a little bit of leg work as well. Oh, I do the yoga for the feet in it, I think. So yeah, you did need to take off your shoes. But the feet are the basis of good posture, so keeping the feet flexible and healthy. So yeah, it was just kind of energy freeing movements, moving joints through their ranges of motion.
Yeah, I really thought that was great.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much evidence now around if you're sat at a desk for a long time.
Yeah.
Yes, like the physical impacts of get up and move around or do some desk yoga. That's great physically for the body, but in terms of cognitive performance as well, getting that blood to the brain is a
get the
huge,
blood moving, get your energy moving. Yeah,
I thought that was tremendous. So if I was a complete beginner, yoga I think can look quite maybe a little bit intimidating, a little bit daunting. There's a lot of terminology that we have to kind of understand.
With my yoga, got my blood supply going.
Say that again, sorry.
Getting warmed up with doing my yoga. You see?
That's what. Yeah, sorry, I've got you doing a full workout here. Yeah, if you're listening to this on Spotify, you're missing out. You should probably watch this one on YouTube. I worked in a gym. I headed up a gym membership sales team for a long time, and at that particular time, we had hatha yoga and ash something yoga. Yes.
Okay.
So there were two types of yoga. One was a little bit more entry level, one was a little bit more advanced, but there seems to be quite a lot again of terminology and so where would you start if this was something that was of interest to you? How do you get started in yoga?
Oh my gosh, well, I'm just gonna get all probably annoyingly technical on you, just because it's just, I don't know, I like things to be technically correct, but hatha yoga actually just means the yoga postures, the physical positions. Hatha means sun, moon, and it's all the styles of yoga if they're physical. So Ashtanga is actually hatha yoga. However, in our West, to kind of make it simple, hatha yoga probably just means something very general, and it could be the teacher perhaps creating their own style, which is pretty much what I do. So I would say I teach hatha yoga, although I do have a style I trained in. And then Ashtanga yoga is a very specific set of poses, which is very, very, very strong.
Right.
You will ache after doing Ashtanga. So yes, I think look for a hatha yoga class if you're new, but be aware that hatha yoga could mean absolutely anything. And I think that you need to find the teacher that is right for you. And one of the things that is very unfortunate is that I'll talk to people and I say, oh no, I tried yoga once, I didn't like it. And I say, well, you haven't tried it with me because you might like it, because every teacher's style is very different.
So I'm going to ask you a question that's going to probably put you on the spot a little bit, and is maybe a little bit unfair. Based on what you've just, so a really good example. So the gym I worked at was a legitimate gym. You might know it because you're in Southampton. It was the Keys Swimming and Diving Complex. So it was, you know, a fairly legitimate, well-run gym. And even then, there seems to be a bit of perhaps a mistake in the delivery of what type of yoga this was. Would you say if you were starting out, is it?
It is. That is what it is, but it's just
So would you be saying go to a gym facility and just try their yoga, or would you be saying look at maybe a private kind of?
I couldn't say. I think it completely depends. I think I would say try some different teachers. If you don't find the one that resonates with you to start with, try another one, because the styles are just so different. I mean, I teach at David Lloyd, where you go, actually.
Oh, no kidding, do you?
Haven't bumped into you yet. Head Gen, that's where you go, isn't it?
Yeah.
I actually teach there, but I gave up my permanent classes when I had Aubrey, so now I just do cover. But my style is ever so different from some of the other yoga teachers and Pilates teachers. I teach Pilates there too. And sometimes I'll do a cover class and they'll say, wow, that was amazing. That was so different. I really enjoyed that. It was so different. I love having something different. So I think it doesn't, I also teach my own private classes. So, you could end up coming to me in my own group class, or you might come to me at the gym and still get me. And it's the same with other teachers. So I think you just have to keep trying. And if you really think you would like to do yoga and you go to a class and you hate it, don't give up. Go and try another teacher, and find one that you resonate with.
Okay, that's really good advice, because I mean, I've heard that before. Like, I did yoga, but it wasn't for me. Well, actually, maybe it was the teacher, maybe it was the style, maybe it was, whatever it might have been on the day.
Absolutely. So go try again.
Right, good advice. Okay. You talked about the fact you also teach Pilates. You said they're very similar. They kind of they cross over and
similar and different, yeah.
So what are the similarities and what are the differences?
So Pilates is more core strength based. So you would probably be looking at something where you start in a stable posture and you maybe move one limb repeatedly, while trying to keep stable. Whereas yoga is more whole body movements. Both you work with the breath, but strangely, the breath call can be opposite in Pilates from yoga.
Right.
Which is why I say to all my students, if you get confused with the breath and you don't know when you're supposed to be inhaling and when you're supposed to be exhaling, don't worry about it. Just observe the breath and then you're doing it, because it's different in Pilates, and so both are right. Yeah, I mean, it depends. I'm very yoga-y, so when I teach a Pilates class, I teach it in a very yoga-y style. A lot of the things overlap. So you've got, planks, you've got boat pose, which is the one where you're like this, bridge pose, which is where you lie on your back and put your hips in the air. They're all the same, but the breath might be different. Or there might be, so for example, the bridge in Pilates, you want to be really straight in your bridge from knees to shoulders, where in yoga you might try to arch deeper into that back bend. So there's subtle differences, and the breath call is different. Yeah.
Okay. Really interesting. Is one harder than the other in theory?
No. It just depends on you, your teacher, the level that you want to practice at. Both of them have, multiple layers and levels. So
Understood.
Yeah.
So again, we're talking about beginners. There's a training principle or theory, particularly with athletes, sport specific athletes, but in general, and it kind of looks a bit like this. So let's talk about say a pull-up. If I go into the gym and on a Monday and I do 20 pull-ups, but those 20 pull-ups wreck me, and now I'm sore for the rest of the week, my lats don't work properly, my biceps are chewed up. Yes, I've got my 20 pull-ups done, but it's impacted the rest of my week. Whereas if I went in and I did 5 on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so it's broken down into bite-sized chunks, I will get more pull-ups done in terms of volume across the week anyway, but also I reduce the risk of feeling sore, feeling injured, probably feeling despondent. I don't want to train today. And so the reason I'm talking about that and using that as a setup, is that the same with yoga? If, for example, do I need to do an hour's class, or could I do 10 minutes a day? And if I'm a beginner, is that a better place to start than perhaps doing a class?
I think it depends on you. And yes, absolutely, you can just do 5, 10, 2 minutes, and it's still going to be beneficial. I mean, even if I was sat at my desk and I went like this, oh, that was 10 seconds, and I already feel like this shoulders dropped. I feel better, and I breathed. I took a long, slow breath. So yeah, I think you need to do the amount that's manageable for you. You might love to be in that long hour class, and it might be amazing for you, or you might need to do it in short sections. And I think you need to practice at the level that feels right for you. You might come in really tired one day, and you might take the kind of like lower level options, or you might be super energized and you might take the higher level options. you can vary it. And the thing about Pilates as well, just quickly, is that you should always feel like you're mastering the technique. So when you do a Pilates class, you actually shouldn't be straining or thinking, this is really hard. You should be like flowing through it like a master. And then you get that really deep, long-lasting muscle tone and strength build up. And you're not straining.
That's really interesting because, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm coming at this from a place of ignorance. That seems to be maybe a misconception with Pilates.
Yeah. But that also means that you shouldn't think, oh, I can't do Pilates because it will be too hard. It means you should take hopefully the teacher should give options always, even if it's less repetitions or a different way of doing it. So you might take the lower level and not think, oh, I have to strain to do the highest level, because you're not going to be doing your body any good if you do that. Sure. And it's the same yoga as well. Form over range. So the form, both in yoga and Pilates, the form needs to be correct, and then you will get the correct stretches for each muscle. If you try to push it too far, you're not going to get the right stretch or the right muscle tone and benefits.
I believe that to be true, actually, for pretty much any style of exercise. I remember there was, so quite a few years ago, there was a guy in the gym I was training at the time, and his big thing was making as much noise as possible. He just wanted to lift the weights and bang them around. And I remember watching him do a deadlift, and everybody was watching him do the deadlift because he was making so much noise. And I don't know where this came from, but he turned to me and he said, I bet you can't lift that. Oh, and my response was, you can't lift that. Do a proper rep. Just take some weight off, kill the ego. It's absolutely essential to make sure that, as you said, it's form first.
To let go of your ego, because that's what he was experiencing, and in yoga class and Pilates class, you have to let go of your ego. It doesn't matter if you're sitting on a block and, like say you're doing a forward fold and you're sitting on a high block and only tipping a little bit, and then the person next to you is folding all the way forward, you will be getting the same stretch as them if your hamstrings are tight, and you're not going to hurt your back. So you have to practice at your level. It's your personal journey. Just let that ego go. Bye.
I'm totally with you on that. Yeah. And of course, as a type A personality, or a red or whatever profile, that was something that I've had to learn over the years. And we're both practitioners of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and again, very quickly you learn you better park your ego at the door, otherwise today's going to be a bad day. Before we get on to BJJ, because I would like to talk to you about that, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on hot yoga.
Well, I've actually never done hot yoga. I'm a very sensitive person. The teacher who taught me on my yoga teacher training is also a very sensitive person. And I remember her saying to me, or saying to the class, I think, that hot yoga puts too much of a strain on your body. It might well suit some people, but I know that it wouldn't suit me. I am curious one day to try it, and hopefully I will, but it is, from what I've heard, very, very intense, and you get dehydrated, and a lot of energy will be moved within you. And if you're a highly sensitive person, it might be too much energy. You can actually move too much energy through yoga and have bad effects. So you do have to really listen to your body.
I think that's really interesting, because I agree, and I'm on the fence. And again, I keep saying it, but I just want to keep pointing out, I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to this stuff. I understand human function and how the body works, and human performance. I'm pretty good with that. Specifically when it comes to yoga, I'm not the guy. But I look at it from one standpoint of, well, we know that heat and muscle flexibility go hand in hand.
You can overstrain yourself because the heat makes your muscles too flexible and you push it too far.
That's a really interesting point I hadn't considered. Hydration and muscle mobility and suppleness aren't best friends. There's also the elevated heart rate to factor in. So yeah, it's on paper it makes sense, because you'd be warmer and therefore you'd be more flexible, but
but you're not
There's
really
probably
more
other
flexible. You've just heated up your muscles so you can stretch more.
right. That's
Then
a really
you're going to
interesting
come out
take.
and they'll be overstretched, and you'll probably be injured, or could be.
That's a really interesting take. I thought you'd have an interesting angle on that. I'm glad I asked. So let's shift the focus slightly, if you don't mind. This is probably the longest I've ever gone without talking about jiu-jitsu. Anybody that knows me will know I will shoehorn it into any conversation. If you're depressed, do jiu-jitsu. If you've got a headache, do jiu-jitsu. If you're thirsty, do jiu-jitsu. That's kind of my blanket. Like, just do jiu-jitsu. But I do think it has a lot of benefits. I feel like it probably has some similar crossover with yoga at times. It's quite cathartic. You again have to park your ego at the door. It's an incredible workout. And again, you and I have probably only been training together in jiu-jitsu for maybe, I don't know, a couple of months, perhaps.
Months, yeah.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the sport itself, why you love it, and perhaps some of the benefits.
I mean, I'm just a white belt, and I've been doing it for 3 years now, but I've had time off to have my baby.
Of course. And work on your businesses and other things.
Yeah, well, mainly the baby, to be honest. I think I'd be training a lot more if it wasn't
Yeah,
for that.
tell me about it.
And obviously childcare now, even though I'm not pregnant anymore, but childcare. So I feel like I don't know like a lot to say really, but I think for me the main benefit has been the workout, but also getting over just being really nice, because I've been brought up, maybe it's my nature too, but just too nice. I'm too nice. And in jiu-jitsu, you can't be nice. You have to not be nice. So to actually go forward on somebody and, try to submit them, that's huge. That was huge for me. And I'm still getting past it. I mean, I don't know if you were in the class with me when we were doing the chokes, and I was like, oh, I can't do it. I can't squash their neck.
Yeah.
Is that, and to get past that and just stop being such a nice girl all the time, that's been absolutely huge for me for jiu-jitsu. But also I think it is meditative again, because if you know what you're doing, which I don't feel like I really do yet, but for some of the things I know, when you're going through those movements and your mind is in your body, like you can't be worrying about anything when you're rolling in jiu-jitsu apart from the roll. And that is amazing and that's the same as yoga. When you're like, for example, if you're in a yoga balance, you can't be thinking about your worries or what you're having for dinner, because you're focusing on your body and focusing on the balance. And the same with jiu-jitsu, you're focusing on the movements, your body, where your body is, what you're going to do next, how you're responding to that person. And actually it is an energetic link between you and your partner that you're rolling with, so you're sharing that energy together. So I think it is really spiritual, actually.
I don't disagree. I concur with everything you've said. It is very immersive. And you've choked me out before during rolling. And it is that moment of, like you say, I can't think about anything else other than I need to get these hands off my neck.
You definitely can't think of anything else.
That's priority number one. The minute you start thinking about something else, you'll find yourself in a world of hurt. I also agree with the going forth and submitting somebody, or trying to submit somebody, or essentially do something to them against their will. I think sounds really aggressive on the face of it. And I know when I sit here with a black eye and a bald head and a beard and tattoos, and I kind of fit the mold. When I talk about being aggressive and I don't mean
it's
it
not
like
really it's not aggressive.
No.
But you have to go forward.
And I think it helps with conflict resolution, feeling a lot more comfortable standing your ground, not just, and I don't mean in a fight, I just mean in life, just the confidence to say, well, actually, no, this is my stance on something. I also think, again, my wife does BJJ, and I love the fact, and I hate to have to say this, but I love the fact that she knows, God forbid, some stuff that might just save her life one day, or just keep her safe one day. So I think the women's setup that they have at Parity Martial Arts in Southampton is fantastic. I think the work that Joe Wellstead does to really to make that happen is phenomenal, and the work she's doing in women's jiu-jitsu. But you know, I also love the fact that, and I think it's so important that women just have at least a base level of understanding of what to do should they find themselves in a less than favorable position.
Yeah, definitely.
Kat, this has been a super interesting conversation, and I've been looking forward to this one because one thing I do know about you is you're very eloquent, and you speak really well, and you speak very passionately about the things you're passionate about. Give us a couple of maybe headline topics, bullet points to go away with before we close the conversation in terms of yoga, getting started. What do we need to be thinking about? Maybe just 2, 3, 4 points on, I've enjoyed this conversation. Yoga sounds like it might be for me. Where do we go from here?
Okay, so I would say experiment with a teacher. Don't think that you're too stiff to do yoga, because you can use yoga props. I've got some blocks there in the background. You can sit on those. You can place them in between places that might have a gap in them to support you. And if you are very stiff, try and find a yoga teacher that will use props and knows how to do that and give you alternatives. And there's chair yoga. I don't know if you've heard of chair yoga. So for people who maybe have got so stiff they can't sit down on the floor, you can do yoga in a chair, and then you can progress to being able to get on the floor. So try different things. Look for a teacher that knows how to use props. So that would be one. What else?
No, what if you think that's a great place to start?
Oh, and watch Kat Sara Yoga. And I'm very safety conscious. I give lots of instructions. A lot of YouTube yoga videos I've seen, they'll be very bendy and they'll breeze through the whole thing without much instruction. I give lots and lots of detail and alternatives. So it's good for beginners or those who want a deeper practice as well. So yeah, watch Kat Sara Yoga.
Fantastic. And that's Sara, isn't it?
Yeah, so KATSARA.
Fantastic. And it's the same on Instagram too.
Kat Sara Yoga, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Kat, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, and I think it's going to help a lot of people out.
Thank you for having me.
That's my pleasure.